I want to welcome all of you that are out there. I'm going to have Tatiana go ahead and put her dine-in recipe up on the screen so you guys can be pondering all of the wonderful things you could be making for dine-in during this period of time. So she is putting up her presentation, and with this is her special cheese fondue the Swiss way. We will get to our introductions in a moment, but this just gives you something to think about as we wait for everybody to arrive. So Tatiana, when do you serve this?
Anytime you want melted cheese. Hi everyone. I'm from Switzerland, and definitely our national dish, one of our national dishes, is the cheese fondue. It's usually, most people will eat it during the winter. But truth being told, having a fondue during the summer outside, it's really sweet as well. So there's no limit, really.
So are there any tricks to making this?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
it is for those of us who have a little chemist inside, the fondue is really an emulsion. So your goal is to reach that perfect emulsion between the wine and the fat of the cheese. And so you need to go very gently. You need to love your cheese fondue. You need to talk to it when you mix it. It requires a lot of TLC, but all worth it. And then, of course, choose the right cheese.
And how long does it take to make it?
20 minutes. Once you start, well, once you've shredded your cheese, once it's on the stove top, it takes about 20 minutes to make.
Okay. All right. Worth it. All right. Well, we just have a few minutes to go here before starting. And so once again, for those of you that are showing up right now, I want to welcome you to Dine-In with WCL. We'll be getting going here in just a few minutes, but to kind of kick off Dine-In with Tatiana, we wanted to load her favorite recipe, or at least something that really represents her, because as she said, she's Swiss. And so we will send this out afterwards, but cheese fondue the Swiss way is up on the screen right now, and I think it's about time for us to get going here. Let's see, 12:31. So I think we should go ahead and kick off. My name is Sue Parham, and I want to welcome you today to Women's Center for Leadership. And this is kind of a maiden voyage for Women's Center for Leadership, because as most of you know, we've done most of our presentations all live. And one of the things we really love about Women's Center for Leadership is the community that we build between all of the people who attend our programming. So this is a maiden voyage for us because it's a different way of doing things. And we're excited to try these tools. So we'll be testing out a lot of things today to see how we can try and create the same kind of situation with these tools that we do in live presentations. So I want to introduce Tatiana. Tatiana is a really special person. I want to tell you about the first time I met Tatiana. She was a facilitator for Women's Center for Leadership at WCL, and I happened to be seated at her table. And I believe we were talking about, it was either playing big or dare to lead. Maybe it was dare to lead. And by the end of this programming, Tatiana had the entire group in the palm of her hands. Not just in the palm of her hands, but so much so that they wanted to create a book club together after the After 5. Anybody who in an hour and a half can bond people together in such a way that they want to create a book club after an hour and a half, I think is really someone who's inclusive. Now, Tatiana is an HR professional in the Portland area and has spent years and years in this business, but I think there's something that is a little bit unique about her. The way she portrays herself, or the way she thinks, is without inclusion, diversity is just a workplace exercise in numbers. And so she sees diversity way beyond, head counts of different kinds of people. And I think her ability to make people feel included is what makes her special. We are going to be using several different skills today as we go through this. And I want to say right off the bat, since this is a maiden voyage with WCL, if using these things makes you nervous, it makes us nervous too. So trust me, we're all going to give this a try together and have great patience for each other if it doesn't work. But there's 3 things we're going to be using. The first one is the chat box. At the bottom of your screen is a tab that says chat. That gives you the ability to answer questions. Tatiana is going to be, asking things that we would love to hear your thoughts on. And you will be able to see the chat box and everybody else's answers to those questions too if you open that up and type something in. You can decide if you want to give a private response to us as the facilitators, or you can decide if you want to let the whole group see your chat. The second thing we're going to be using is polling. Polling you see also along the bottom. And that polling is going to be kind of a quiz, right? We'll put up a question, you'll get to log in your answer, and then we'll all see how the whole group responded at the end. The last thing we're going to do is unmute and basically have a free-for-all. We're going to let people ask questions at the end. So this is the part that's going to be really interesting. You have 3 hosts today. Actually, I should say Tatiana, the speaker, and 2 hosts, Lauren Purdy, also of WCL, and myself, Sue. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Tatiana and say, let's all learn together. We're learning Zoom today, and we're going to learn about communicating during this crazy time that we're in right now. Take it away, Tatiana.
Thank you, Sue. This is the nicest introduction ever. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So let's take today, aside from sharing this wonderful thing that is cheese fondue, what I wanted to talk about when Sue asked for people who would be willing to share during the dining session, I, of course, started reflecting on where are we in this journey? What's going on right now? And I think that for many of us, what's happening is we've been at it for quite some time. For a lot of us, it's been crisis management. Let's get stuff done mentality. What's coming to life right now is that we will be at it probably a little longer, especially for those of us who have children and the schools are not going to take back up. And so we will need to continue this journey. And I think we have a beautiful opportunity right now to stop, to breathe, and to try to see how we can do things better. And ultimately, it's about creating bandwidth, right? With the stress, with everything that's happening, our bandwidth is shrinking. And if we can control what we can control, that should actually, if we spend some time on what we can control versus other things, it should free up some bandwidth. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today is what I like to call a oldie but a goodie, which is, I'm sure many of you have seen the circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of concerns. And what happens is that we all have different circles, but it's our realities. What can we really truly control? What can we actually influence? And then what are those concerns that we have in mind? So my first question, actually, Lauren, if you can help monitor the chat box, my first question to all of you is, in your words, in your world, what do you see currently in the circle of control, of those things that you can control versus not? And think about a home, but also think about your teams. And either you manage people or you're an individual contributor, but in those areas of work. Lauren, I don't know if you're seeing anything coming in that you can share.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of responses about attitude and reaction.
Yeah.
Also, the quality and quantity of work, that's a good one. That one is very hard to control, even in the best of times, I think, the quantity and.
Yeah. And it's one of those that actually is on the cusp between, depending on your position, right? Depending on where you land in your company, in your team, can be between the influence piece or the control piece.
You know, what's interesting, Tatiana, is I see some people or know some people who, for example, if they're in the supply chain, they are swamped with work because everything has to change right now about getting product to market or not getting product to market. And then other people are in roles where their job is not as busy. So even if we think we can control our workload, I don't think everybody's controlling their workload equally right now.
I think it's fair. I think we are absolutely seeing a shift on what takes priority versus not. That's a very good call out.
Yeah.
So for the exercise for today, of course, I listed a couple of things that we can tap into when it comes to the circle of concern. I think one thing that we have in our minds, what we have zero control over, is the COVID-19, clearly, the school closures for many of us. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks for the other stuff. When it comes to circle of influence, and I want to go back to that workload questions, one thing that we can probably help our teams and help our businesses, which is the way we do business and the hours of interaction and the hours, the schedules that goes around that. And then the big piece that I would like to address today, which is part of our circle of control, that goes with those comments about the reaction we have to things, the attitude we put to things, which is how we communicate. And truth being told, when I was preparing this, I am a people person. I do live for inclusion and bringing people along for the journey, whatever the journey being. But I prepared this thing, I was 100% in my head. And it wasn't sounding right at all. So it was one of those moments, it's like, I cannot quite get the tone right. And suddenly I had this epiphany of, how can I talk about this? How can we have a discussion around communication only from the head? And I think right now, more than ever, we have to have our empathy hat on or heart on. Care, kindness are really probably more than ever superpowers. And I don't know for you, I'm not always at my best lately. And I have to remember to keep the high road and to be a kind person. So we will try to keep that hat on for the rest of the presentation. So how we communicate. Many of you have seen this graph or a similar graph. And when we are in the office, when we are in the I almost called it the real life. This is real life. But when we are in a more normal situation, we pay attention to only 7% of the spoken words. 38% is about the tone and the voice, and 55% is about body language. So now let's have the second question of the day. What do you think drops or changes once we move from a face-to-face environment to a virtual environment? If you could use the chat box to give some answer. And
so
they can be.
The question again is, what do we lose when we move to a virtual environment?
What do we lose or what changes? There are some things that change. What are you seeing, Lauren?
We're seeing a lot about tone and voice, the ability to build relationships, easily distracted or, creates a lot of distraction when trying to communicate.
I'm kind of curious, Tatiana, how many people are feeling Zoom overload now because of those things we lose. It'd be fun to hear if you guys are loving Zoom, getting used to Zoom, or if you're kind of starting to feel that Zoom overload while you're while you're chatting away there. Oh, Zoom overload is a thing. It just came up.
Mhm.
Oh, so, but I'm so happy you guys are here. You know, thank you for being here if you've already got Zoom overload.
That's a true story. That really is. The thing is, I feel I'm getting really good at the technology, but there is definitely a sense of too much. How much is too much Zoom?
It is interesting here because there are extroverts saying that they're loving Zoom and it's been a lifeline. So I think it definitely goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's maybe a side note for you, Sue. It would be interesting to have a session on introvert. This is the time for introverts to shine. As most of our companies are really extrovert, but that's a different conversation. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the comments about things that are lost or changed with the virtual world?
The Ray Bradbury story. Simulated screens having many faces to see. The overstimulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'll have to bring that story to the table.
Another one, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this graph is pretty self-explanatory. Definitely the voice, definitely the tone. I think the body language is a massive loss. Even with the video, I speak with my hands, but many people don't, and the videos are not always on. Other things that we see actually shifting and changing that I think are worth mentioning is people are no longer in an environment that is breathing whatever the greater picture of your company or your team is trying to achieve. So there is some kind of a disconnection to the greater picture that is happening, and isolation happening. Another one is on biases. I think we cannot underestimate the shift in biases. Some people, and I am one of those, who think that maybe my boss or my leader are going to think lesser of me if I am not 100% all the time reachable on my IM or on my phone or via Zoom or Teams or whatever is the tool you're using. Some people, because we all have bias, some people think that work from home is an excuse to have a relaxing day. So there is also we know the data that women tend to want to work harder or have to work harder in order to be recognized. So that's another question here, is how deep is this running, and are women in particular working even harder to demonstrate that they are at home and they're still committed, when we know that many have to homeschool and navigate those work-life balance, that the line is even blurrier than before. And then, of course, the other thing we cannot underestimate is the mental tax. And by that, I mean, people are stressed. And when we are stressed, we are really not at our best. And that conveys in the way we talk with people. That conveys in the way we try to just share information, or even try to get people to do things for us. So there is a lot of changes. One thing we can actually focus on that should help down the line getting to results of collaboration and getting to results of a better outcome, which is the communication style. So communication style, what does it mean? That means each individual, we do have preferences on the way we speak, but also on the way we are being spoken to. There are a bazillion tools out there when it comes to communication styles, and your company, your teams might already be using some things. For the purpose of today, we are going to use a tool, or to review a tool that I'm familiar with, that is easy to grasp, and it's free. It's online, it's out there, you have free assessments, you have a lot. So Depending on where you are, the company you work for, you might have something already defined for your company, or you're looking for a tool. And so we are going to look at this. So when you're on a journey to identify communication style, again, to help that communication out and in, when you're on this journey, the first thing is you probably need to find a tool, like I said, free online stuff or something your company is purchasing. The goal is to create a common language. All of these tools, it's always the same. It puts you in buckets, and then it's about understanding the buckets for you and for others. They are not the truth, and we are multiple, we are complex, and it's just one help to streamline your communication. The next step is to do a self-assessment and also work with your team for self-assessment. Following that, there is one piece that what I find in my practice is missed quite often, is to, again, stop, take a moment to breathe, and start wondering, who are my stakeholders? And my stakeholders, what's their style? The importance of knowing the style of your stakeholders is really simply to help you talk to them in a way that they will respond to you. It's no more complicated than that. And then the last piece is practice, practice, practice. We know it makes perfect-ish.
So I think the nice thing about this during this time is, you know, teens in general everybody loves learning about themselves, right? And if there is a breather, if you do have a moment in this time where you can have the team kind of focus in, this is a perfect time to do it. How do I like to communicate and be able to share that? It's a perfect time to use these tools.
Absolutely. We see a lot of teams are coming together right now in a virtual happy hour, virtual lunch, those moments of connections. And it doesn't need to take a whole lot of time to go through something like this. And it can be fun, it can be ludic, it really can be something you do over lunch and add a little just levity to it, still with the benefit, the outcome of learning from one another. So for today, like I said, we're going to use this communication style. For those who do not know Young, first off, he's Swiss. Let's start with the important stuff, right? So he's from Switzerland, and he is a little bit younger than Freud. And he's really one of the fathers of the psychology, and he has done a lot of work on types and on feminine and masculine, not as in men and women, but really about the attributes that are linked to the human beings. And he came up with this very simple graph. So the idea, or it comes from this model that you have people, so you can see it's a 2x2. You have people who are either at the top more task-oriented, or you have people who are more relationship-oriented by nature. And then you have people who are more on the introvert spectrum, or people who are more on the extrovert spectrum. Of course, this is not a black and white model. We have probably a little bit of everything in us. But for this model, we're going to simplify, okay? And so somebody who is super task-oriented, who is pretty introvert, that person has been deemed analytical. If you go online, you will see other words associated with this quadrant, but I like analytical, maybe because I am partially analytical and I can understand that word pretty well. So the analytical person is somebody who loves data. It's somebody who is super efficient. It's somebody who is very focused, logic, and loves detail. If we stay in this realm of people who love tasks. We have people who are more, but they are more on the extrovert side of things. We have drivers. And those people are the ones who are super competitive. They're objective focused. They like to win. They're achievers. They're decisive and very direct. And now if we move towards more of the relationship-based people, somebody who is introvert and relationship-based, they will be called an amiable or a socializer. And they're all about the team. They're all about people, high empathy. They are agreeable, very supportive, very loyal. And then on the other side, you have somebody who is relationship-driven and extrovert, is called an expressive or a relator. So it's somebody who likes the big pictures, super high energy, very creative thinker, visionary, doesn't like details whatsoever. So those are the labels we're going to put to people. So question here, Lauren, we have a poll here to ask you, if you read these 4 words, which one do you think is your dominant one? Knowing that you can be a little bit of everything, but which one do you think is your dominant one?
This is really interesting because there was a time when I was working with a group of people, and the men in this organization were all very, very, very analytical. And in a meeting, he was a young man, but he would put his glasses on the tip of his nose, you know, and look over them like this. And I came in as kind of an energetic communicator, which anybody out there that knows me knows that I'm a little on the energetic side. And I felt like I was constantly overpowering him. I felt like he would, you know, kind of sit back in his chair with his glasses like this. And finally I got a clue. I'm not that fast. It took me a little bit, but finally I started kind of thinking, okay, Sue, you've got to mirror him because this is not working. Overpowering him is not working at all. And so I did that. I thought, okay, I'm just going to take clues. If he's quiet, I'll bring my voice down. If he talks slowly, I'll talk more slowly. It was interesting. It was a great exercise for me.
What did it do for your communication?
I think it really improved it, you know. But I had to remember every time I went in, you know, it's not like one and done. You don't do it and say, oh, I've got it. You know, each time I would have to kind of talk myself in my head down into that mirroring sort of mode.
Yeah. And I think it's such an important piece is, again, when we revert to stress, we forget these little things that help connect and reach other people in their world. So what do we have on the results?
Just shared the results here, and it looks like it's pretty well divided, with a little bit skewing more on the extroversion side.
So 14% analytical, 19% drivers, 33% amiable, and 33% expressive. Interesting.
Very interesting. We could go to an analysis of what that means, but we don't have time today. That's again my analytical speaking. So I want to be thoughtful because I realize that we are getting close to time. So the one thing I wanted to go through is how do we talk to these people? And so for an analytical, when you talk to an analytical, to your point, Sue, we have to adjust our talking style to reach the other person on the other side. So to an analytical, we're going to be fact-based. We're going to use data. To a driver, that's your person who loves bullet points. Give them bullet points. They're happy. The amiable, talk about what's in it for the people. Talk about the consensus. Everybody needs to win. And for an expressive, tell a story. Those are the people who will send you an email in one gigantic paragraph to say something like, hey, where do you store this information? So I know we are almost at time, but I really was hoping we could do a quick case study. So if some of you
we have time, including our Q&A. We have some time to get into this and then wrap up with a few questions.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So what I wanted to do is a quick case study, and for you all participants to take now about 3 minutes, and to start thinking, again, knowing how you would want to talk to an analytical and driver, an amiable and expressive, how would you tailor your conversation differently if you wanted to break up with a partner? Can be a home partner, can be a work partner, can be, I'm sure everybody, one of us have gone through a breakup at some point in our lives. And so how would you deliver the message if the partner you're breaking up with is a driver, an analytical, an amiable, or an expressive? So maybe something like 3 minutes to think about it. And then we will open the mic for you to be able to share your take.
This could even be, you know, being a freelancer or a consultant and, you know, breaking up with a client per se, I guess, right? Because sometimes, you know, sometimes that has to happen too, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you include leaving a department, kind of breaking up with your boss in this? Is breaking up with a partner if you wanted? I mean, if you were moving, taking a role in another you know, different department.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really about how would you change the communication to make sure that they receive it the way you intended.
Now you'll note that Lauren is back as Sue Parham, so there's two of us up here.
What is the real one?
Parham, that's funny. All right. So we have about 10 more minutes on the call, so I guess we should go ahead and open things up.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I would love if you can unmute everyone, and would love to hear from anyone in the audience how you would be breaking up with with a driver or with an analytical, an amiable, or an expressive.
Is anybody willing to jump in here and share with us? The voices aren't coming through.
We did get a couple questions during the last case study slides about the different personality types, kind of where people kind of maybe feel like they're hurt, you know, in between the two groups, and how they would use that to better identify their own personality, or if their personalities change within different situations.
Why don't we feed some of those questions in while people are thinking about how they would approach a person of a different type?
That sounds like a good plan. Absolutely, we change. We are multiple, we said it. We will address a conversation with one person at home or at work, and differently. We will put different hats on if we talk to somebody in a different team or at a different level in the company. So we do adapt, we do change, and it's a matter of being flexible and having flexibility, shifting between the various styles. I think it's very important to know where you land. The first time I did this assessment, I was right in the middle. But then the second time I was way more in the driver, because when I needed to do it, it was a time in my career where I needed to be really decisive, and I was channeling that part in me.
Tatiana, we have a person asking, can you be an extrovert and yet still have a really analytical or driver communication style?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, again, these are labels, and it is just the natural tendencies, but that doesn't mean because you don't like details that you cannot look at data, for example.
And isn't it also true that there are certain learned skills? So I remember doing an assessment once, and it kind of came out that, let's just say I was a hot mess when it came to something. But I wasn't really in real life. And they said, well, in fact, sometimes based on the role that you have to adapt to learn some skills to make yourself successful in that role. So I had adapted my hot mess to, really be able to, not be a hot mess in order to do the job that I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we need to distinguish between things that are intrinsic and we do naturally, like breathing. We do them without even thinking about them, which are sometimes strengths, sometimes are things that are little pitfalls, but we need to be aware of. But then there's a whole array of things we can learn and we can get better at, and we can tap into many resources we have. So absolutely. And I think in leadership in particular, you come with a natural tendency to lead people, but then you can always get better. There are so many tools out there. The question is, take the time to do it. And often that's a big gap we see, is people have other things to do and don't take a moment to stop and do it.
I do think we have people with voices out there now that are unmuted, Lauren, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So jump in if you have a comment.
All right. Hi, this is Melanie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, going back to your example and your question that you had about how to approach someone in a breakup situation, it jumps to mind right away for me that the access for data or feelings or tasks or feelings is something that I would look at and say, well, if this person is a feelings person, I would start off with a message around feelings or acknowledging their feelings. And if they were a data person, I wouldn't start off by talking about feelings. I would share some facts that are fairly
my likability for you is only at 25%.
And then the left and right, though, that the introvert extrovert, that one I struggle with a little more, like, how I'm naturally an extrovert and I'm very comfortable around other extroverts. So can you comment on, what factors you would use or how to approach an introvert with a difficult conversation like that?
I think it kind of depends on, I'm trying to share my screen again. I think it just depends on where in the introvert spectrum you are, right? If you're an introvert, again, an introvert task, that's when you would approach with the 27% likability, or we had X many meetings and they didn't go well, or you dropped the ball, whatever the message is. So for an introvert who is more, again, black and white, very concrete, I would use those concrete stuff. For an introvert who is more on the feeling piece, it gets a little bit harder because oftentimes we don't want to hurt their feelings. I think it's okay still to use some facts, but it's actually really recognize the human nature and being able to speak to the fact that you understand that the situation has been complicated, that there are different factors. And so I refer to it sometimes to put little flowers around the things you are saying, still delivering a clear message, but using softer words, if that makes sense.
All right, we have about 7 minutes left here, so let's kind of hit on some of these questions really quickly. Lauren, if you would like to jump in and summarize some of what's been happening in the chat so we can get, the quicker you can respond, Tatiana, the more questions we can take on.
Great. We got some questions about the platform. A few folks were curious if there's a book or any online resources, specifically free online resources that they could use to learn more about it.
Yes, absolutely. If you Google communication style Young, so Young being spelled Jung, and you can also type free assessment. There are a couple that pops up right there, and they are They will help you do an assessment, and it is absolutely, you will find a whole lot of information online.
I wanted to mention something. I don't know, can I be heard?
Yes, you
Yes.
can. Go ahead.
Hi, this is such an interesting conversation. Thank you. It occurred to me that to compensate for body language or just being in a room, and I'm definitely someone who is empathic and kind of feels the energy in a room. But here, if we're online, to pay attention to how people are using language, and what kind of vocabulary they have, and the style of just use of language to indicate who are they? Are they a driver, or are they analytical? Are they amiable? To match that as a strategy to meet people where they're at, because so much of meeting people where they're at is, you know, paying attention to where their gaze is or what they're, so that really intrigues me, of like really hearing from this perspective of the different style of person or personality types.
I think along those lines, it's important for those that are extroverts to consciously engage the introverts, because in this kind of technology forum, it's hard for an introvert to just jump right in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately that's the one big message, regardless of the tool or the resource we are using, is what can you do to take a moment and to really reach out to the other people and the other styles and the other ways of doing things?
That's a really interesting question, because as a facilitator of a meeting, you can't always see everybody else attending the meeting. Whereas in life, you can see if someone is kind of wanting to get into the conversation but holding back, or thinking but not offering. So I wonder if there's pre-work that can help with these Zoom meetings online. If you know that you have introverts in your team that aren't always comfortable jumping in, is it possible to say, you know, John, I'm going to want you to speak to, you know, X, Y, and Z this meeting, kind of give them some time to, you know, prepare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some tools. By the way, forgot to mention it earlier. At the end of the presentation, and again, Sue will make it accessible to all of you. There are some, I listed some resources that can be used overall, just beyond the communication style, but resources that can be used to help create healthy behaviors around this work from home situation and this remote way of working. I think one best practice that sometimes when we are facilitating and we have a group of 20 people and we are in the room, it's doable. For having done Zoom with people for over 25 people, it becomes almost impossible. So I think the smaller the group, that gives space for people to actually pay attention to those more quiet voices, to just continue to have that discipline to make sure that everyone is heard around the room. And that's the job of the leader. Sometimes they don't do it. So it's your job as well as team members to actually say, hey, we haven't heard from XYZ, what's going on here? And be advocate for one another.
Okay, do we have one last question, Lauren, that we can sum up from all of those that have come in?
The last question I received, I think we just didn't touch on, was where they can find the resources either on WCL or going forward to learn more about this sort of thing.
So this is the Let's All Learn Together piece. I know there's a way I can send this presentation to you, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to have to figure out exactly how to do it. So plan on hearing from us, because I know you also want the Swiss fondue recipe that we kicked off with at the very beginning, because that's important to the dine-in programming. So we'll get that to you, I promise. Give me 24 hours to make sure I've got it down. So with that, it is 1:13, and that wraps up our time for Dine In. I want to thank Tatiana for joining us today, and I want to encourage every single one of you to use this with your team, with someone you work with regularly. One of the exercises I've done around this, Tatiana, is where people kind of go to their corner of the type that they are and prepare a list of the things that they hate about the other communication types. So those people that are analytical will, point to my side of the room and go, I hate that these people go on and on and on without data or want me to speak up initially. It's a perfect tool to get people to really open up to how they feel about communicating with the team. So this is a way that you can learn something about your team members and have fun, this week, and make this time off worth it. And it's also a great way for you to coach people that you work with. So with that, we'll be closing today. We want to invite you back Thursday, where we'll be talking with Alice Tang. And Alice has an incredible take on networking that is unlike anything I've heard before. When she was talking about it a couple of weeks ago, I melted. And I think it's something that women particularly can put into their portfolio of the way we might approach things authentically as ourselves. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining us. I want to thank Lauren for managing the whole technology side of things today, and Tatiana again for, spending your time and bringing your knowledge and energy to this group. We hope to see you guys again soon.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.